I want to start off by looking at where you are in the process once you get to the letter of intent. Once you get to the letter of intent, you've already had some very preliminary discussions between the buyer and the seller. You've probably signed a non-disclosure agreement, which in essence basically says that any information that the buyer would glean from discussions or evaluation of materials with the seller, they would keep confidential. They would only evaluate them for their own purposes of evaluating the business. And so that being done, the next step would be a letter of intent. The letter of intent is a general statement of intent. So it's a general intent, and it doesn't get into the granularity of all the details that you would get once you get into the next phase, which would be negotiating a definitive asset purchase agreement or stock purchase agreement and going through a detailed due diligence where you look at the details of the financials, the assets, etc. So that's where we are. We're at the letter of intent phase. And also it is, in fact, as Nate mentioned, it's a non-binding document, but it's very important to get it right to the extent that you can get as much information as possible, because what often happens is when you have a general statement of intent and then you get into negotiating with the other party, and the more you vary or deviate from the LOI, it could cause some ruffled feathers, if you will. So you want to get as much information as you can put in to set forth your general intent. So with that being said, I could walk through each paragraph as we go through this, and I'll try not to be too wonky about it, but give you an overview.
No, that's great. I figure I'll jump in for a moment to validate what you just said. Absolutely. At this stage, we've already talked. If you're a buyer, we've already talked with the seller. If you're a seller, you've talked with the buyer. Now you're seeing that interest written down. Buyer serious. At the same time, this is not binding, so they can back out. They're going to go through due diligence and they're going to verify, what they understand to be factual about the business and start dotting I's and crossing T's. But at this stage, this is when we start to get serious. And we're starting to, hone in. We don't have multiple letter of intent signed and going with multiple parties at the same time. We're working through the process with one buyer at a time. And as a seller, you'll have an opportunity. If your business has attracted lots of attention, you'll see several, letters of intent, and you'll have a chance to pick the one that you think is the strongest offer. At this point too, we've also validated and vetted the strategic fit of the buyer and the seller, the financial capability of the buyer to be able to finance the deal, or their liquidity to be able to purchase the business. And then also, we're looking at, kind of the whole package, so to speak, as to how it's all related to the business. The buyer's experience. Are they a first-time buyer? Have they bought multiple businesses? So all of that has been evaluated, and now we're looking at the LOI. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications about new videos and interviews. And introduce yourself in the comments. Are you a buyer or a seller?